Hello and welcome back to Troubleshooting Zen Study and Practice. Today we have reached number 50 in our series of questions. And this month's question is, what is the ideal length of a sitting meditation practice as part of a daily life practice? So this is a question about Zazen, sitting meditation as it's otherwise known, and is a question that does appear quite often with people particularly who are a little bit newer to the practice or have been just sort of starting out, who want to know really how long they should sit for. Now this is almost to a point a question of what is this meditation actually being done for. I know quite a lot of the apps, the Headspace apps and so on, suggest about 10 minutes a day or maybe 10 minutes twice a day. But if people go to a regular Buddhist group, if you're sitting meditation in a Buddhist environment, then quite often you'll sit for longer, maybe for half an hour or maybe an hour or even an hour and a half on a regular basis. Certainly, for example, the group that I sit with, we recommend everybody to sit a minimum of 1 hour a day, 6 days a week. And when we go to the temple or the center for practice, we might even sit an hour and a half. And the reason for sitting longer, as I say, really just depends on what people, are sitting for. But either way, whether we're sitting shorter or longer, or for different reasons, like everything really, like doing exercise, we start small and we gradually build up. But it is a good idea to be able to sort of sit for longer as well, particularly if we're trying to particularly if it's part of a spiritual practice. And this is perhaps what the biggest difference is. So people who sit for well-being alone, i.e. just to de-stress, may generally sit for shorter periods of time, and this is probably why apps such as Headspace and the rest just suggest sitting meditation for a short period of time, or they may have a sort of timer as part of the app as well. And this, as I say, is normally the effect that's trying to be created is a sort of declutching, a temporary period of declutching there, to de-stress, perhaps looking to benefit from some of the research that shows that meditation can lower your blood pressure and boost the immune system and so on, and a number of other sort of benefits. And these are very sort of obviously admirable effects to and reasons why to sit meditation. But to be clear that people who are sitting in a Buddhist context or sitting in a Buddhist center or as part of a spiritual practice, part of a spiritual tradition, are not just sitting for well-being, although that may be part of it. The purpose of a spiritual practice has to do with transformation, of the heart, and has a very different raison d'etre and a very different way of seeing a meditation practice. So generally, in a spiritual tradition, really any spiritual tradition, and just to remind ourselves, of course, that meditation is not exclusive at all to Buddhism. Obviously, it was practiced by its parent religion, Hinduism. Before that, the Buddha himself was taught meditation in obviously in other traditions apart from Buddhism, because he hadn't actually started the movement yet. And Buddhism has been meditation has been practiced in Hinduism for centuries really. But actually not even just, we tend to think of Oriental or Eastern religions, east of Europe, that is, when we think of meditation. But meditation exists in all religion. People are obviously aware, for example, of Christian meditations. There are some of the saints have written books about it. In Judaism as well, there in the mystical strands of Judaism, there's practices of meditation, and obviously in Islam too. People are obviously aware of, like the whirling dervishes, the Sufis, and so on. And prayer also, prayer also, long, prolonged prayer, where the attention is focused on a prayer or on an image, in some cases, or on, divine, what's called divine reading of sacred scriptures in a certain way. All these things can be meditation as well. And of course, meditation in activity is something that's practiced by obviously Buddhist practitioners. This is what we know as daily life practice, also sometimes known as a mindfulness practice. This is just practicing meditation in all the activities of the day. And if you happen to have ever been to, a monastery, for example, and seen monks and nuns, whether Christian or Buddhist or whatever, they will also talk about the fact that their work, usually physical work, is also part of prayer or part of meditation. And what makes it so is that the activity is dedicated to that. So the activity is not self-based, and this is really perhaps the distinguishing mark in the practice of meditation for a spiritual tradition. It's not about I, me or mine. In fact, quite the reverse. It's trying to remove the emphasis or lose or forget the emphasis on myself by becoming absorbed in or at one with the activity itself, so that I am forgotten. And a lot of the sort of picking and choosing, my preferences, what I like and what I don't like, are usually, sidelined and forgotten, or are sidelined and forgotten. So it's not a matter of whether I like or don't like a particular task. It's just a case that we get on and we give ourselves wholeheartedly into it. And so coming back to the practice of sitting meditation, it's going deeper into that state of being able to let go of myself. And this is tricky because when we talk about myself, what we're really talking about are thoughts about myself. So, as we know, I sit down and I start meditating, and I think I should be meditating this way or that way, and I'm calculating and I'm judging whether my practice is working or not, whether this is a good sitting, whether it was better than yesterday, or whether I'm getting better, etc. This is still all about me. These are thoughts about me, and this is what we refer to as I. Me, myself. So the meditation causes us to forget myself, and although this letting go of myself, which also includes letting go of my anxieties and a lot of my judgments that provoke those anxieties, obviously has a somatic effect, has a physiological effect upon the body as well. But it also, as part of a spiritual practice, it's also moving out of that area of just self-concern and self-regard. And this is why sitting for longer as part of a spiritual practice is advised. So, for example, when I go to the temple or the Buddhist society and we have a class that lasts an hour and a half, we might, on some occasions, we will sit 3 periods of sitting, each just shy of 30 minutes long, with a little 2-minute break in between, so that we can sort of unfold our legs and stretch a little bit before sitting still again. And this is useful because even if we build up to a half an hour sitting, which is a decent, we should be able to sit half an hour regularly. Should be working up to that. But the only thing is that even with half an hour, it can take 10 minutes or so to begin to sort of really settle down. You've got a few minutes, and then the last 10 minutes already the mind begins whirring and anticipating the end of the sitting and what I'm going to do next and whatever. So we actually don't get very much time really in a state of deeper samadhi. So sitting for an hour allows us to do that. Sitting for an hour and a half is even better, obviously, because even if that half hour is that sort of calming meditation, as it's called, we've still got half an hour, maybe a little bit more, of being in a deeper state of samadhi, that's oneness, before the mind starts upticking again, anticipating the end of the sitting. So these things, being able to sit for a little bit longer does deepen and intensify the experience of samadhi. And that then is taken off the cushion into the activities. And what we mean by this is that in that samadhi, there obviously, with most meditations in Buddhism, that samadhi is on the breath, on the out breath, or count on the out breath. The technique can vary a little bit, but it comes down to the same thing. So that forgetting of myself, that one, becoming at one, and two, three. So by that act of will, being able to hand myself wholeheartedly in to that samadhi of the breath. And that skill, that ability, we then take out into the world. And when we find that the focus of the heart is, in the thinking center, as soon as that realization comes in, then with the whole body, I can give myself back into the washing up or whatever it is that I'm doing. But even the listening to this talk, there's a samadhi in that too. And no doubt we're aware that sometimes, I'm thinking about something else even whilst I'm listening to this talk, and then when that realization comes in, make the effort to give myself back into the listening to the talk once more. And that's the skill that is being developed in daily life practice, and it's a skill that's deepened in the practice of Zazen. So rather like regular exercise, we have to deepen that and extend that a little bit. If you just go to the gym and you lift exactly the same weight every single day, you'll put a tiny little bit of muscle on, and then it plateaus, then it stops, because the body gets used to it. And in fact, we probably won't really stick to it very much. But to begin with, we do have to start small. So if we're really starting out at the beginning, just being able to sit 10 minutes, great. But then don't just rest on the laurels there. Build it up. Certainly build it up to half an hour, and then practice that for a while, and then double it, and build up to 1 hour, with as I said, just with a couple of minutes break. So if you're on a chair or whether you're on a cushion, doesn't really matter. If you're sitting in the half lotus or whatever, you can relax the legs. Don't get up and walk around. Stay on the seat. But also, if you're sitting on a chair, you can you can move your feet and your legs a little bit. Again, don't overdo it. Don't have to go and do push-ups or something like that. It's just a little bit of turning the neck and so forth, because sitting very still for half an hour, one begins to build up tension in the shoulders and the neck and the back and in the legs if we're sitting cross-legged. So we have a couple of minutes just to as it were unstiffen, and then we go back into the second round, and then after that, normally after that, as I've sort of said before, we turn over the merit. So again, this is part of the practice of de-emphasizing myself, and we turn over the merit for all beings. Of course, I am one of that collection of all beings, so there is some benefit accrued to oneself, but that's fine, because it's part of it's part of being all. Part of being all beings is not just about me first. So I'm sitting meditation for my well-being, for myself. No, we turn over the benefit of this sitting and this chanting, if we're going to do some chanting, for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy, may all attain Buddhahood, something like that. And that's important. That's an important part of that turning over the merit of everything that we do, whether it's daily life practice or sitting meditation. And the chanting as well is a good way to finish that. If we are sitting for an hour, then, again, the group I sit with, we advise chanting the Heart Sutra and the 4 vows, which can be found on the Zen Gateway main website at thezengateway.com. Look under the What is Zen in the top navigation, and you'll find a whole audio course on chanting, as well as the text for the Heart Sutra, a very popular Mahayana chant, for which there's a translation there as well, and the 4 great Bodhisattva vows, which is turning over the merit for the benefit of all beings. So that's a useful way to end that. Now, sometimes people say, oh, should the chanting form part of that hour? I think a lot of people do that, but some people prefer to sit a full hour and then put the chanting on the end. So you might end up an hour and 10 minutes or something like that for the whole practice. A little bit, it really comes down to the time that people can afford. So obviously no one's standing over your shoulder or looking over your shoulder at what you're doing. This is for you to try out. This is what's suggested, and what is of benefit, what others have found of benefit. So it's obviously up to each of us to be able to do that. So the other thing as well, obviously, having a place to sit, as we're talking about Zazen. If we're going to sit for a little bit longer, it's good to do 2 things. One is to try and regularize the sitting, i.e. make it the same time each day, part of our timetable. And the other thing is to create an area where we can sit. Now, obviously, if you have a large house and you can dedicate a whole room to it, fantastic. I've never been able to do that, so I have to use a corner of a room. Usually it's a bedroom. Doesn't have to be though. It really, but somewhere that you can perhaps erect a shrine with a Buddha image, and obviously a candle or some incense, if you can do have a little incense holder, something like that. If you can't, it doesn't matter. And if you don't like naked lights, you can always get those. You can get those little sort of battery powered tea lights that are very useful. Actually, absolutely nothing wrong with those at all. Just keep the altar clean, keep the Buddha Rupa clean, and if you are using incense, remove the old sticks and make it show one's respect for the altar, for the shrine. That's important. It's the attitude that's being cultivated as well as the keeping clean and neat and tidy of the whole thing. Okay, so yes, so as to to come back to the question, what is the ideal length of sitting meditation practice? As I say, if it's depends on the motive really, but if we're doing it, obviously this is the Zen Gateway, so we're looking at meditation in a context of a spiritual practice, then yeah, I would say an hour. Build up to an hour. Make that the aim if we're starting out. It doesn't have to be done, as I say, all in one go. Build up bit by bit. Make the start with 10 minutes just to get used to it, just to get into the practice, but do it every day, or six times a week. Six times a week is ideal, and then one day off. But build it up and make the half hour the first goal, if you like. And then once you've sat half an hour, you can sit an hour. I mean, people sometimes go, oh my goodness, if you can sit half an hour with that 2-minute break in between, you can sit for an hour, really. Trust yourself, trust the body. It knows, it can do these things. So yeah, and then obviously turn over the merit, which can be done by the chanting, because that's an offering to the Buddha. And the Buddha is for the benefit of all beings, obviously, teaches for the benefit of all. So that's a way of turning over the merit. And that really makes that will make for a very solid sitting practice. And once we can sit for 60 minutes comfortably, then to be honest, we can begin to think about going on sessions, which is Zen retreats. For someone who hasn't sat very much, I wouldn't advise going on a retreat, because you're going to sit for many hours a day. Obviously not all in one go. It's broken up by meals and coffee and breaks and things like that. But you sort of do need to be able to sit an hour and a half, in one go, i.e. 3 periods. And you might like to try that at home from time to time. Yeah, throughout the year there are certain memorial days, such as the Buddha's enlightenment and the Buddha's birthday and his parinirvana, and there's the memorial days as well for the patriarchs of the tradition, Master Rinzai and so forth. These can be looked up, and we may decide to sit a little bit longer on those days to commemorate and turn over the merit of that, for the remembrance of the Buddha or the patriarch or whoever, or just for the benefit of all beings. So in that way, we get to extend the practice a little bit, and it can be allowed to be a little bit challenging. And don't forget, being able to come onto a session, onto a Zen retreat, is supposed to be a challenge. So and there are, having sat many myself, there are very clear benefits for it to have that intense period of time, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 5 days. I know other traditions do 10 days. The Theravadins often do a 10-day retreat for lay people, for example. So yeah. So okay, so hopefully that gives a sense of how to approach meditation, zazen, in a spiritual practice, and how to set that up and how to build it up, and what to aim for. Okay, so we'll leave that question there. Don't forget, if you yourself have a question that you'd like a comment on or commentary on, please send it to Rinzai at thezengateway.com. That's Rinzai, Rinzai, at thezengateway.com, and just mark the subject line troubleshooting, and that way we'll be able to identify it quite quickly. So yeah, look forward to hearing from you. All the best for now.